Then, and I'm back to you on my channel, Military Election Forecasting. Today I'm going to be talking about all of the recent political issues and political topics that have happened in the last week. So first I'm going to be starting with Donald Trump being indicted on 37 federal counts for having classified documents, which is one more basket in Donald Trump's closet in terms of controversy or etc. I don't think it has a major impact on his chance to win a Republican primary, but I do think in a general election matchup, having more ammo for your opposition to use against you is never a favorable sign. And for suburban voters and independents and college-educated voters, which have all historically been problems that Donald Trump has struggled with, that is going to have even more impact on him in a head-to-head matchup with Joe Biden in the general election. But as for Republican primary, like as of currently, I don't think this will have a major impact. But it is worth noting the fact that he got indicted for the second time. This has never happened to a president in American history before. The second topic that happened is Mike Pence announced his candidacy for president this year, seeking the Republican Party's nomination. And Mike Pence is very unlikely to win a general election or the Republican primary. Like, he does not have an appeal to a specific part of the Republican base. Like, for example, he used to have a lot of appeal to traditional conservatives, but he's lost that ability to appeal to traditional conservatives because he associates with Donald Trump. But he also has lost support amongst the Trump base because of his, not backing Donald Trump all the way, especially during the Capitol insurrection era. So with that, Mike Pence has kind of alienated a lot of Republican base. And his policies are even more right-wing than Donald Trump or even Ron DeSantis. So, he do very bad with Democratic voters and with independents, as well as not have the full backing of the Republican base. So Mike Pence is a really long shot candidate. But I do think that it's worth noting that a former vice president, is running against his presidential predecessor, running against his boss, actually, as well as I think that Mike Pence adds a lot to a debate stage or adds a lot to diversifying the Republican Party's image. So I definitely think that it's very worth noting. I think that it's something that's somewhat beneficial, at least from a primary perspective, to have all of these different candidates and all of these different options for the Republican side of the aisle. And for Chris Christie, he's also running for president. He just announced recently that he's running for president as well. Chris Christie is even more of a long shot than Mike Pence to win the Republican nomination. He is extremely unpopular amongst Republican voters in general, and he's also he doesn't have a lot of name recognition. Most people don't know who Chris Christie is, and the ones that do absolutely despise him. So with Chris Christie, many people expect that he's in the race just to attack Donald Trump, which does make a lot of sense. I think that he's here to drive Donald Trump's poll numbers down, potentially to favor a candidate like Ron DeSantis. But there's no proof to necessarily back that up. It's just a conspiracy. So with that, I do think that Chris Christie adds a lot to Republican build as well. But he's realistically on here maybe to increase his political name recognition or try to vie for a cabinet spot and a hopeful 2024 Republican victory. So the Republican candidate that did win would put him back in his administration. I'm not really sure what he wants out of this. Potentially to be a vice president, I'm not sure, but he's basically just in the race for future ambitions that don't have to do with the president, at least as of currently. Another thing that happened, I think, which is the most important this week, was that the Supreme Court ordered voting maps to be redrawn in Alabama to accommodate Black voters. This is something that really benefits Democrats in Alabama and just across the country in general, because we know that Black voters are oftentimes disenfranchised when it comes to gerrymandering or what's called packing. And basically, the Supreme Court said that the maps in Alabama are unfavorable. And that's really good for Democrats, because if you look at places like, for example, Georgia or South Carolina or Louisiana, all of those states have districts that clearly don't benefit Black voters in terms of voting power. So it's a realistic chance that all of those districts get thrown out, especially Texas and Florida as well, or not just Black, but Hispanic, Latino voters are oftentimes, and you could make the argument for Arizona as well, oftentimes like not drawn fairly in maps. And I do want to point out that gerrymandering is not something that just benefits Republicans, or Democrats do gerrymandering as well. But usually Democratic gerrymandering is to get back at extreme Republican gerrymanders in the South. So I'm not saying that it's right, but let's just be realistic. Like in gerrymandering, like Democrats have put forward legislation to stop gerrymandering. So realistically, if gerrymandering stops on the Republican side, Democrats will stop gerrymandering. That's just a pretty not even non-controversial thing to say, but it's really beneficial to Democrats in the South because they have a lot of places to gain. And the Republicans only having a 4-seat majority, Democrats could gain that back just through redistricting. And it also protects Democratic voting maps in North Carolina because, as we know, in North Carolina, it just became a Republican supermajority in the court, and they were planning to redraw maps to benefit Republicans. But we know that those maps would have obviously disproportionately affected Black voters, which are the majority of Democratic voting Black in North Carolina. So that protects Democrats in North Carolina. It could for sure add Democratic districts in Alabama and Georgia, as well as South Carolina, and potentially even Tennessee and Ohio and other places where there's arguably where Black voters are not fairly represented, and Florida and Texas, more so from Hispanic and Latino voter point perspective, and also Black voters in Florida could also be receiving future districts with this ruling. But it is worth noting the Supreme Court might not take it as far as many people online are expecting it because, realistically, they do realize that this would cost Republicans the House, especially when Republicans are already unlikely to hold on to 2024. The last thing I want to talk about is Cornel West announcing that he's running for president. And of everything that's happened to Joe Biden, this is Joe Biden's biggest challenge because we already know that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is running for president, as well as Marianne Williamson. But both of those candidates don't realistically hurt Joe Biden's chances of re-election. Like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. doesn't really have appeal to really any of the main Democratic voting blocs, except for obviously some working class Democrats in certain places, which wouldn't really have too much of an impact on a 2024 presidential election map. And Marianne Williamson, like being in between Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders, I'd say, but she has appeal to a lot of younger voters and somewhat a lot of more progressive voters, but realistically, I don't really think that she has enough to damage Joe Biden in a head-to-head matchup. Cornel West, fortunately for Joe Biden, has lost a lot of support. But Cornel West is a Black philosopher, which means he spent his whole career being someone like Al Sharpton or someone like Attorney Ben Crump, which means he's dedicated his whole life to talking about Black issues and Black politics. And that's a problem for Joe Biden because Democrats rely on Black voters more than anything to win any presidential race. And even though it's unlikely for Cornel West's campaign to get streaming since his attack on Barack Obama in 2012, as well as numerous other prominent Black figures in the Democratic Party, whether we're talking about Kamala Harris or Raphael Warnock and numerous others that he's criticized, it is fair to point out that he's lost a lot of ground amongst those voters. But regardless, he still does have a very long history of having a specific tie to that community. And with that, that could really hurt Joe Biden in places in the Rust Belt and in the big cities. It could definitely stop Democrats from having any chance of holding on in Georgia, as well as North Carolina, because Democrats rely on the whole Black community coming to their favor just to put them over the top in a lot of these swing states. And even taking a 1% to 2% then is enough to flip Georgia and states like Wisconsin and stop Democrats from having any chance to win in North Carolina, and potentially also stop Pennsylvania and Michigan from going to Democrats as well. So Cornel West is a long shot. He's lost a lot of footing amongst his base. But it is worth noting that he has a demographic group. He has history of, being very prominent and very well-liked in the demographic group that Joe Biden depends on the most. And it's Joe Biden's quote-unquote base. So with that, it's very interesting to see how he would perform. He's not going to be on a Democratic ticket, but he is going to be a third-party candidate. And if I was Republicans, I'd be trying to get Cornel West on the ballot in all 50 states, hoping he can take away votes from that demographic to help Republicans tremendously in the Rust Belt and in Georgia and North Carolina. Very similar thing to what you saw from Jill Stein back in 2016. This is something that could really benefit Republicans if they played their card right. But as of now, he's losing rapid support amongst his own community. And Democrats are just benefiting from all of the issues going on in terms of currently. So many Democrats are aware of someone that splits the vote when they weren't really aware of that back in 2016. So it is fair to point out that it might not go as far as you saw with Kanye West in 2020, but regardless, it is worth noting that it could realistically be extremely beneficial to Republicans in the future. And with that, that's all the important political topics I have to talk about, at least for this last week. This last week has been very interesting with Mike Pence and Chris Christie and Cornel West both jumping in the presidential race for the 2024 presidency, as well as Donald Trump getting indicted again, as well as the Supreme Court striking down Republican favoring maps in Alabama. So this has been a very interesting week politically. Make sure to tune on to next week. And I actually plan on doing this further, talking about how this could benefit Democrats, Republicans, just talking about the political issues in our country. So with that, thank you guys so much for listening to my video. Make sure to have a nice day. And my next video will be about the shifting of how each state is shifting, if it's shifting Democrat or Republican. So make sure to tune into that. Again, thank you guys. Have a nice day. Thank you guys for tuning into my channel. Please like and subscribe. And also feel free to comment down below my video. Have a nice day, you guys.